And, of course, in the light of all the stuff that's been happening, certainly in the last 24 hours at the very least, comments all over the place. The town is awash with opinion and comment. And I thought it would be a good chance to welcome back to the programme journalist and editor of Hong Kong, Tom Grundy. Tom, good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me again.
Morning. Yeah, well, you just don't have to look very far to get all sorts of comment here in Hong Kong, online, on TV, on the radio. Tom was on the BBC World Service last night, straight after things were going down, and it got me thinking, I wonder what people outside Hong Kong are interested in right now. What's the kind of worldview?
Well, I think there's always confusion about what Hong Kong's status is anyway,
exactly.
Let alone, where it is in Asia. But I think there's even more confusion because it sounds like, Occupy Wall Street. And when the movement, decides to call itself that, it can kind of add to the confusion. But I think, as with local people, in the context of things like Tiananmen Square and some of China's more, aggressive incidents over the years, there's concern about, what will happen next and how it might act. I mean, Hong Kong it's not Tibet or Xinjiang. It's got a very high degree of autonomy. So who knows what will happen and what consequences that may have even, for Britain.
Yeah, well, we'll come to that one in just a second because that interests me. It's been suggested, you mentioned Occupy. People say Occupy and compare it to Wall Street. Well, it's very, very different, of course. It's been suggested that these guys have slightly blown it by putting the title out there when perhaps it should have been like a working title in the first place.
Perhaps, yeah, because we already had actually an Occupy Central going on in Central. And then again on July 1st, during the annual pro-democracy march, a lot of media figured that was Occupy Central. And then there was an actual occupation in Central as part of that July 1st march, which was not Occupy Central. So you can understand if you're an outsider, even though this has been brewing for a couple of years in Hong Kong, that, some people get things wrong and it's quite confusing. But it's in the greatest tradition, actually, of civil disobedience, and they should be perhaps comparing more, as they have more recently, to Gandhi, Martin Luther, et al. And this is the prism, I think, through which foreigners can understand it better.
Yeah, you're quite right. Potato, potato. If you don't understand something straight off, as an outsider, friends of yours and mine, perhaps in Aussie or England, wherever, if you don't understand something straight away, human nature says you just kind of give up on it after a while. Your attention leaves.
I guess so. It's complicated as well, and there's lots of other things happening in the world just in the last few days. But I think there's been quite a successful campaign from the other side, the pro-government, astroturfing groups, who... And the state-run media, who've done their best to kind of smudge the issue and to make it seem more complicated, and having an anti-Occupy, central movement. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an anti-Occupy central movement at some point.
Well, this is the thing,
Tom. It confuses me.
Yeah, well, you're taking it on from what I just said, human nature angle. This is the thing where people start to laugh at you.
Yeah, but one does have to wonder if it's deliberate sometimes that... the pro-government side is trying to add to the confusion. But, yeah, I guess it's human nature, and this isn't really a black and white issue.
It sounds like they're just trying to feather their nest. I mean, of course, that's been suggested as well.
Yeah, it was pretty blatantly said last week that, this system is going to be in place in order to protect business. I don't know how all the financial capitals and most other civilized democracies around the world manage to function. Similarly, they have protests as well, in the hard cells have said there'll be minimal impact, so I think that's also being a little overblown. But as I say, the other side of the argument are really going to town in scaring people about this. But it seems there may actually be arrests because of inciting, this illegal civil disobedience. The rest of the organisers and people who take part.
Yeah, because when something does end up breaking a law in any country, they're going to get lifted for it. But basically, aren't they? Well,
we had 5,000 officers yesterday out in central Wan Chai. There are thousands of barricades, but it doesn't add up compared to other protests in Hong Kong, because there is also a long history of peaceful, dissent. And I've no doubt that unless there are any spoiler tactics or anything shady, that this will be, equally peaceful. There's talk on the other side of violence, but there's been no evidence or any suggestion that anyone will be going down that route. As I say, Benny Tai et al. Have been citing MLK, Mandela. they're going about it in a very careful way, and we all know it was coming yesterday, but they said it would be the action of last resort, and it certainly was. Now we've got some answers from Beijing.
When you listen to the pro-Beijing guys, the pro-establishment guys, they're starting to all use the same vocabulary, and one thing that's been cropping up, I mean, you can really hear it in certain words, in certain interviews. There's one thing that's come up that I wonder if you understand better than me. How come all of a sudden this is an issue of national security?
Well, they certainly put a wall around LegCo, a building that is designed to be open and transparent, to the public, and they've cited concerns there. There were some other security analysts outside of Hong Kong that suggested that Hong Kong may be vulnerable, but again, no evidence. I don't know if it's scaremongering, an excuse for some sort of crackdown, but I've not heard of any threats certainly, and.
Of course not. See, national means the whole nation, and that is the department of the PLA. I mean, that, to my knowledge, is in the law. That one word changes things.
Well, we also don't have any diplomatic autonomy in Hong Kong. We can't comment on or have any opinion on any international issues or, what's going on in local levels in China. So, it's a pretty grey financial capital to, I think, any troublemakers. It doesn't make sense to target the city.
Well, let's just do a couple of generalisations here. I mean, today, would you say this is a really dark day, or is it business as usual? It's just been under the microscope.
I think perhaps deep down people were hoping for, some sort of concession or something different. It's only when you kind of hear the truth and the final decision.
I suppose so.
But as I say, they were waiting for that. The Democratic camp, will probably veto this, and they've compared the system to North Korea. But I've actually been to Iran a couple of times, and I would compare it to that, because they have this illusion of democracy whereby an unelected fellow at the top selects two or three which everybody else can choose from. And they also happen to have this unusual instance of pro-government protests. And those guys, just like some of them who've taken part in the pro-government protests here, have been paid to do so or given incentives.
Yeah.
So I'd compare it to Iran, this system, or the Miss Hong Kong pageant, which apparently had the exact same voting system last night on TV.
I was reading about that. Fill us in a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't watch. I was out and about, but yeah, they choose. I think they whittled it down. They nominated 3 potential Miss Hong Kongs, and then everyone else got to vote on them.
They probably thought they were being funny. I
perhaps, yeah, bad timing, but maybe that's the future.
Maybe so. And the other thing is, there's this constant crutch that's being used of, let's look forward, forget about the history. Well, that comes up many, many times. But first of all, let's look at the ex-British Prime Minister. See what you make of this one. 1996, Major said, if in the future there is any suggestion of breach of the joint declaration, we would mobilise the international community and pursue every legal or other avenue open to us. Well, has there been? And do you think they will?
Yeah, it sounds hilarious now.
It does,
I don't see Britain budging an inch, and they've already indicated because of all the trade. Why would they now? They're deep in the pockets, with China, and with the US, they hold all of US debt. So I think you're just going to have some more lip service from Cameron, as he did a few weeks ago when the Chinese Premier visited Britain. Anson Chan dug that quote out, and I think it's quite telling. It sounds like from a different era, because 20 years ago, the international kind of attitudes to the one-party rule and China were quite different, and now human rights issues, and in terms of it just respecting its own constitution and international law, doesn't seem to get as much of an airing.
Well, there's another one I want to get your opinion on. This is from 93, and this one's doing the rounds, of course. Li Peng, the method for universal suffrage should be reported to the NBC for the record. Just tell us what's going on. Whereas the central government's agreement is not necessary. Hong Kong develops its democracy is completely within the sphere of the autonomy of Hong Kong. The central government will not interfere. Now, I'm assuming that that's a kosher quote.
Yeah, and it was in the People's Daily in March in 1993, and it makes for sobering reading now, because it's pretty much the opposite, and we've just seen from that period up until now Beijing constantly redefine what it believes democracy and universal suffrage is, and then they tell us that we don't understand what it is. Well, we won't if you keep redefining it. But, I watched Martin Lee, talk about this and how they moved the goalposts, last night, the democracy icon, Martin Lee, and he said that, they're giving us a choice between a rotten apple, a rotten orange, and a rotten banana.
Yeah.
So you can see from that old quote that how the attitude towards...
don't want our squillions of people on the mainland to get a whiff of this, and they decide they want to go. Is that the crux of this whole thing, do you think?
Sure, they will talk about, I think, protecting business and such, but they're thinking about Xinjiang, Taiwan, Tibet. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place here because the world's watching Hong Kong. It's meant to be autonomous. They won't get away with some things that happen on a local level. Yeah, I mean, it was meant to be a showcase for Taiwan, wasn't it?
Well, I think they can forget about that now. Surely,
yeah.
if you were the boss of Taiwan looking at this, you'd be going, no way, pal.
Certainly, and likewise, we look at Macau and think, no, thank you. And that's why, you had people staying overnight near in Wan Chai, and they'll be going to follow Li Fei today to Asia World Expo. And this is going to continue in waves and waves, as Benny Tai promised. I also had a chat with over the next coming weeks and months, I think.
Yeah, also that quote about there will be blood, that didn't really help things at all, did it?
Yeah, there's been a few people made off-the-cuff, comments about the PLA. I live next to one of the barracks, and it's difficult to tell because there are military hardware kind of movements all the time, but there were viral pictures and some concerns and a couple of stories.
Yeah, you've got to get this right, haven't you, Tom? Or one has to.
We can't jump to conclusions, and I think anyone who pretends to know what's going to happen next or how Beijing may react, they don't, because no one knows what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
But yeah, one official has certainly used the word bloodshed, and there's been a couple of rumblings of PLA involvement, but generally I find the police to be fairly okay, but considering how many they're threatening to send out and all the barricades, who knows what will happen.
Another one of those crutches that's doing the rounds at the moment from the pro camp is trust must be earned. Tell me this, what are the Hong Kong people supposed to do right now? Turn lead into gold. Trust must be earned. What have they been up to?
Some people say love must be earned as well. And
Truly.
They're saying that the Hong Kong chief executive must love China. I don't know how that would ever be defined.
How do you quantify it?
Because if it's got to be in law, you're going to have to be able to... sue somebody if they don't. How does it work?
Yeah.
So it's another legal minefield. But I don't know what Hong Kong could have done more to earn it.
Exactly.
In terms of the history of peaceful protest here and dissent, and it's an extremely well-behaved city compared to anywhere else in the world. I don't know where else you would have young people citing Gandhi, as opposed to doing whatever else went, at school, but it seems scholarism at least, are going to be at the forefront of some of this, and they're going to be leading student strikes as well over the next few days, weeks.
I mean, talk about development, Tom. I mean, you wouldn't have students with this kind of nous or foresight or guts or whatever you want to call it, even 10 years ago.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Where else in the world do you see it? So I think it's quite inspiring stuff, and it was pretty emotional last night. You saw tears and quite angry scenes, people holding up lights, and I think people feel a little bit ripped off, and